Hello and welcome to the breakdown. Yes, round 2 of Super Rugby is behind us. My team is ready to attack the big issues, and tonight in studio, a very special guest.
Tonight on the breakdown, the team discuss Super Rugby's big issues. The Crusaders lose. Glenn Jackson helps us figure out why. The new All Blacks head coach joins the team for a Sky Sport exclusive. And our eye is on the North with coaches firing shots.
Fun, isn't it? No comment.
A massive show, so don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome once again. Yes, you'd have a few of the All Black selectors and coach. You'll be pretty happy with the performance that happened in Hamilton on the weekend between the Crusaders and the Chiefs, both teams going at it. That's what Super Rugby is all about. Kane Hames, Mills Muliaina and Sir John Kerwin with us. And JK, like you talk about, I suppose, setting a standard. We saw that on the weekend, but across the board, I'll tell you what, it was a big weekend for a number of teams, including your Blues.
Yeah, well, the great thing is Blues on a roll, Crusaders in crisis. Love it. Absolutely.
Crisis. You're calling it a crisis.
I'm calling it a crisis.
Crisis.
And I'm calling the Blues on a roll.
On a roll.
Getting it in early.
Well, it's a streak. There's no doubt about it's a streak, Mills, but there's a lot of territory to go in this competition. But the quality of rugby seemed to take a step up.
Oh, I certainly did, and definitely in Hamilton as well. You know, I suppose the pressure coming into two teams that won round 1, the Crusaders. We know what they've sort of done, the new look coaching staff at the Chiefs as well. And, you know, on the field, didn't they deliver? It was a fantastic match.
First commentary gig upstairs, down in Dunedin for you and the Highlanders, under the roof. How did you enjoy that experience, you know, being a part of that team?
Yeah, I loved it. It's something very new, and what I really liked about it is the Sharks. How good do they look this year? And then I know there's a lot of talk around the South African teams, but Sharks, Stormers, they're up top.
And your sideline commentator was right, eh?
That's a really good way you two
I can't remember who it was.
About how worried you are about the Highlanders.
Oh, we'll get to that later.
You just avoided the whole thing. Two Highlanders and they avoided it.
All right. Let's move on very, very quickly. Let's quickly go on to the fact. Let's have a look at Super Rugby in 60 seconds.
2 from 2 for the Chiefs, with a strong second half again, the key to their success. That and a bit of Sonny Bill Williams-inspired magic from Brad Weber.
Why Noe? What a ball! Moment of magic from Weber.
The Blues were strong on the road against a reasonably woeful Waratahs team. Number 8, Hoskins Satutu, had a real scare.
But they're still in the clock. Oh, sorry, wrong call. Hold the phone.
But it was all the Blues in the second half as Mark Telea grabbed 2 more tries to give him a hat-trick for the night and the Blues their first win. Jordie Barrett's boot kept the Hurricanes in the match in Buenos Aires. The 63-metre penalty, 3 metres longer than Dan Carter's best effort, and now the longest kick by a New Zealander. 2 late tries securing a rather unlikely win against the Jaguares. As for the Highlanders, sorry Jeff, but on the evidence of the mauling they took from the Sharks, it shapes as a long year for your old team.
Sharks really good though. Really, really good, 42-20. They were great in the first half and played some quality rugby. The Brumbies had a good win over the Rebels. The Chiefs obviously at home beating the Crusaders. Blues are off the mark in 2020. The Lions as well, good win for them over the Reds. Stormers haven't conceded a point in 2020. Very, very good at home, and there is that result. You'd have to say an upset result. The Hurricanes beating the Jaguares. Jaguares last year's finalists. What a great weekend. Entertaining. We know what's coming up this weekend. Sharks, Hurricanes. We've got the Blues and the Crusaders. But if we talk about the competition as a whole, I'll go to you on this, JK. The fact the Crusaders, the defending champions, they've been so very, very good. Was their defeat to the Chiefs maybe in some ways good for the competition?
Yeah, totally. We can have a laugh about it, you know, and be parochial about it, things, but it is still early. I think Mills and I were talking about it off air. If you lose 3 in a row, then the psychological thing goes. But the Crusaders losing 1 early is not a major for them. I think the big thing is the Chiefs, how good they are. We're all excited about Gats coming home, He's got a smile on his face. The players seem to be enjoying themselves. We've got Cruden back, you know, so they now become the favourites, and the Crusaders go, oh, how are they going to recover, you know? So it's just good talking points.
Look, the great thing I know about the Crusaders is the fact that how they respond. Not great news for the Blues, but Kane, I look at that game as a whole, particularly for the Crusaders, the fact they're missing Richie Mo'unga. They're always going in, not under strength in the position, but having to adapt to someone else playing there. This is not something they're going to worry about, is it?
No, I wouldn't say so. And although I'm a Chiefs man, I'm more of a rugby fan than anything else, and got to spend a couple of days down at the Crusaders. And I sort of picked the Crusaders to win that game, and I picked that because I thought that they're a very good rugby team, and they're probably one of the better rugby playing teams around at the moment. And the difference for me in the second half was the Chiefs didn't allow them to play that rugby. You know, they're a little bit niggly, making sure they were getting them out of their game.
A little bit niggly?
Oh, and I think that was the difference. You saw the Crusaders in the first half. They were the best rugby team on the field. In the second half, Chiefs weren't necessarily the better rugby team, but the Crusaders weren't allowed to play the rugby that they have been practicing.
Yeah, I've been impressed with the way the Chiefs. You've got to remember that's 2 weeks in a row that they've finished strong. You know, and they didn't let the Crusaders. They got underneath their skin. That's probably one concern for the Crusaders. The fact that that last sort of penalty that Makalio sort of gave away, that ended up being that 3 points later on, and you never see that from a Crusaders side. That'll be the only concern from me, from their side. In terms of everything else,
still good.
I think there's a big...
In terms of everything else, I tell you, man, they had plenty of opportunities, and they just...
And particularly the first half,
exactly.
Right?
And so they won't.
First half.
And David Havili, I reckon he had a damn good game, you know. So you can't take that away from them. But I think there's plenty of opportunity for them, so they won't be too sort of concerned about that loss.
Well, let's focus on the team that is playing well, and that is the Chiefs. And the fact the return of Aaron Cruden, Damien McKenzie gets his first start. We'll talk about Lachlan Boshier in a moment, because he was outstanding on the weekend for the second week in the row. But the influence of Aaron Cruden, he's a competitor, and JK, he came off the bench, and then did we see it once again the second half of this contest?
I think for me, when you talk about tens, the other interesting thing about the Crusaders, it's the first time in their history they haven't had 5 other first fives lined up, right? So, but what you're seeing
You're still bitter about not having one of them, I know. So
exactly.
Let's move on.
I am a bit bitter about that. But what you see in Cruden is absolute maturity and composure. And you cannot do anything but earn that through playing years of big football. I mean, we talked about him going to France. He's come back, he's improved in areas, Millsy, but it's just that composure. And that gives everyone else around you just this confidence.
Yeah, and that's the confidence they're after. You know, all of a sudden he comes in, his presence, and you think, here's a man that's been there, he's won championships, he's gone overseas, but he's still got to come out and perform well. And what he's doing under pressure is huge. And now you look at the other side, okay, Havili hasn't sort of played at 10, but you look at, Mo'unga, having that competition against those two, I mean, that would have been even bigger. But certainly what Cruden is doing at the moment and the way he's performing is something, second to none at the moment.
And it's not just about the first 5-8, it's not about the return of Damien McKenzie, who I would say, though, every time he touched the ball, there was a collective, what's going to happen next? That is so exciting for fans to get a part of. If you've got a chance to watch this young man play, get down there. But a lot of this game was won up front, and Lachlan Boshier came for the second week in a row, was outstanding. We've got Ian Foster a little bit later on. We'll talk about where he thinks Lachlan Boshier's game is at. But you add Sam Kane into the picture, the fact that Mitch Carpick playing well, and you got Luke Jacobson. The combination they're going to have, the threats they're going to have in that back row are pretty significant.
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting. Those 4 names that you mentioned, they're all open side flankers, and you've got 3 of them playing on the field at the moment. Well, I guess it could be for the Chiefs. I mean, you watch Lachlan Boshier on screen, a lot of his dominance and a lot of his turnovers are coming at the end of the game, and it's a real key area for the Chiefs at the moment. That's how they're winning the game, through Lachlan Boshier stealing stuff at the end. But he's wearing 6 on his back, and he is a 7. Tyler Arjon is playing lock. He is a test 8. You've got Mitch Brown playing lock, and he is a Taranaki 6. So Chiefs, if you want to make the forward pack at the moment, you either be a Lucy and switch your positioning around. Lachlan Boshier is a 7. Like oh, I guess so. Lachlan's a 7, playing 6, and he's still playing a 7's game.
9 turnovers though, 4.5, averaging 4.5. Now I know that's going to be hard to sustain over the course of a tournament, but the impact he's made already has to be impressed.
Totally, and I call him a border collie, and they love a border collie down in Chiefs country, and I call him a border collie because he's always just there. And his turnovers, if you look at his turnovers, it's actually the turnovers that he gets under pressure, where a loose forward that's making a decision might think this could be a penalty here. Yeah. And so his critical turnovers are unbelievable. He just sniffs around like a good border collie. He's always taking a little pass. Where would I see his improvement? Probably a little bit more ball carrying. If he wants to look at higher honours, he might need to carry the ball a bit more. But for out and out, retrieving, he's a good
There was a big weekend, though. A big weekend for the Hurricanes, Mills. The fact that you talk about the performance of them, you talk about the Highlanders, they're going to need to recover and come week 2. Well, there's plenty to talk about, as always, Kirsty, and there's plenty of news surrounding the game.
Yes, as we spoke about last week, it's all about this load management for the All Blacks players. It's a topic that will not rest, potentially until changes are made. Now, the absolute latest is a pushback from some of our Super Rugby coaches. They're wanting these blanket rules to be banished, and they're wanting a case-by-case basis, more one-on-one catered to the individual, depending on circumstances. Now, Warren Gatland, the head coach of the Chiefs, he's obviously been there as a club coach and as a test coach as well, and he's wanting more trust put into the coaches and an even balance. He's saying these guys, the Super Rugby coaches, are all professional and they know exactly when their players need to be rested and how long for, maybe more than 2 weeks in some instances. Tony Brown, the assistant coach of the Highlanders, well, he said that the rules have worked in the past for players like Daniel Carter, Richie McCaw and Kieran Reid, but are not necessarily working at the moment. He's even said that these rules have potentially cost players their careers, long-term careers in the All Blacks, and ended those careers earlier than they should have. He's talking about guys like Malakai Fekitoa, Elliot Dixon, and used the example of Waisaki Naholo as well. He said that last year he was rested and so his form wasn't up to scratch in Super Rugby to be selected by the All Blacks, and instead he was surpassed by Sevu Reece. So we've crunched the numbers about All Blacks minutes and what they did last year. Let's take a look at those now. 2019 season, you've got your total minutes on the right-hand side. Anton Leonard-Brown, 1,786. You compare that to someone like Dane Coles, just 889 minutes. So these arguments there, does Dane Coles need to be rested or should he be playing as much as possible? And then on the flip side, we've had a look at fringe players, the players that didn't necessarily play for the All Blacks but are vital for their Super Rugby sides. David Havili, 2,046 minutes. Is this a guy that needs some rest? We spoke about this last week, didn't we, JK? And you said that you need to do this on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with Brownie. I think there's two different arguments there. You cannot tell me that the resting of players is going to affect your selection. A tired player is not going to be selected. So I think Brownie's getting a couple of things confused, whether it's the break over the Christmas or whatever that is. But resting the players we all agree with. It's just, where do we need to look at it? Has Havili played too much? Well, is it affecting his game? Versus Dan Coles, who's played 800 minutes. So let's not get these arguments, you know, confused.
With the fact there's two. The discussion has been around the resting of players in the first 3 rounds, the minutes restrictions. That's what it's been. I think what Brownie's talking about in here, and look, he's a good mate of mine, but he's talking about the guys having the ability to prepare. They need to prepare to perform. They maybe need to perform and need to have the confidence to perform. And the guys he's talked about, they obviously haven't come in at the level and haven't been able to push through and perform at the back end of Super Rugby. And that's the challenge, right? The challenge is getting this balance right. Yeah. The numbers, though, are we protecting all of the players? That's my question. When a David Havili plays 2,000 minutes... Yeah. And the fact is, under the same protocols, is the fact, well, reality is, he's done all of the work, he's done the training. Yes, hasn't played the test matches that All Blacks have played, but if you're going to put these restrictions in place, should be for everyone, or does the evidence say, you know, maybe we need to consider some other things, some other factors?
Well, that's what the discussion is about. Should it be case by case? And obviously it does, because you take Brownie's point. I don't want to go back there because in some ways he is right. For guys that have come back, and you notice the names that he mentioned, Richie McCaw, Dan Carter. Well, let's categorise them. Let's say, okay, these are guys that are definites because they won't have that pressure. And then you have the guys like the Malakai Fekitoas and the Naholos that are sort of fringing, and then the David Havili. So perhaps that needs to happen. They need to categorise, well, these are, okay, we don't want to say it, but let's say, well, these are definites, there's your minutes. These are guys that have been injured, have been carrying the workload, and then sort of work them out in terms of their minutes by doing that sort of structure.
Yeah, well, the term that comes to mind is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I don't know. I like that. What our measurement standard is. Is it on minutes? Is it on blood tests, like you said last week, where you're seeing different things? I know that's a bit radical, but what are we measuring it? How are we measuring it? And then, therefore, how do we manage it? Sometimes it's tougher. Talking to Andrew Strawbridge from the Chiefs, sometimes it's tougher being a non-test player. If you're in a team like the Chiefs, you'll make the semi-finals. Then what happens if you go to the Mako and then you make the finals again, and then 4 weeks, 3 weeks later, you're back into Super Rugby camp? Sometimes I think it's harder being a non-test player because you're getting thrashed week in, week out. Yeah,
but I agree with you. And there's another thing that we need to talk about, and I think the players need to come to this party at some stage because the wages certainly don't reflect the minutes. A lot of occasions. Now, but let me just get back to Kane's argument. Yeah, but the All Blacks play through till November. I think the reason why everyone got a little bit upset was they finished a bit early this year. But you know, the rugby finishes if you're not a Test player, you know, a month early. Then if you're an All Black, you go November. So I think there is a case for the individual to go, okay, right, I actually need to play. But trust is the big thing. When I was coaching, some players would turn up from their break not in condition to play when they needed to. Now, that's been sorted since, but individual players. If Waisaki Naholo plays all those minutes, shows some early forms, by the time he gets to the All Blacks, he's tired, you know. So it's individual. How do we measure it? What does it look like? Does it reflect in your pay packet if you're Havili? Because if you're Havili, then he's worth way more than, another player.
Fact that the ability for a Super Rugby player to earn what he can earn compared to an All Black is significantly different. I'm wondering whether or not, Mills, the fact that a guy like David Havili and Akira Ioane, who played all but 40 minutes of the Blues season last year, are they getting compensated? Is that possibly why we may be losing some players? The fact, you know, you sit in that middle range, your compensation can only get to here if you're not an All Black. And that, to me, I think that is a challenge, because if you want Super Rugby to be the competition, the best competition in the world, surely you want the best players to be here and available.
Oh, absolutely. You do want the best players to be here. And you're right about that argument. Those guys, you know, they're out there all the time and they're thrashing their bodies. And they can make way more money. Even, you know, guys that are not even, they're bordering on All Blacks, they can make way more money overseas. And so that's probably a reflection. They've got to go back and say, well, here's the salary cap. Perhaps that's a reflection. Let's go and say, well, these guys are going to, you know, realistically play more minutes, so we're going to pay them a bit more than perhaps what would give an All Black in Super Rugby. And that's probably a discussion, you know, as franchises need to have.
But I've got to jump in here, and I totally agree with you, but I'm sick of hearing about the money from overseas. We need to think differently. I don't know who came out a few years ago and said, would the government give our players a tax cut? Right? Do we set them up in property? I don't know, but we need to go, we are always going to get our butt kicked, Northern Hemisphere money, in the middle level, at the top level. So how are we going to look at this differently? If we keep sitting going, we're going to lose this fight. So how do we, right now, let's say, and I'm hope he does, become an All Black for a long time, but let's say Havili doesn't. What do we need to do to keep him in the game, get his revenue up, make sure he stays here, plays for the Marcos, becomes a local legend, can be, you know...
Yeah, we've already lost that fight. We're losing. But the problem is, you know, the drive for guys to stay here was that All Black jersey. Okay, all of a sudden, that carrot to guys, it doesn't mean that much anymore, because they can earn that much and they know that they can leave. They're getting their bodies thrashed, they can go overseas. So it is.
They get thrashed more in overseas.
And that's what they do.
And
but
plenty more discussions are going to go on about that. And we'll have someone after the break who is more than qualified to give us his thoughts for the first time on The Breakdown, live in studio, the All Black coach, Ian Foster. Yes, welcome back to The Breakdown, and excited here on The Breakdown tonight for the first time live in studio on this show. The All Black head coach joins us. It's Ian Foster. Congratulations. Welcome. You were down in Hamilton. We saw a shot of there. You and Foxy are laughing about something that was hilarious, obviously, but how exciting for you as an All Black coach to see a contest like that in round 2?
Oh, I thought it was great. You know, like it's a great time of year. The ground's hard, the sun's shining, and the players sort of are fresh and really wanting to get into it. There was 2 great teams who have got a great record of playing against each other, and there's a bit of a rivalry developing there, which is pretty special. So, and you know, clearly it's nice to see them win in Hamilton, but it was a great game. Both teams played well.
We'll talk more about the game a little bit later. Look, we've just had an in-depth discussion. We're talking about... Yes, you heard, you're over there. But it's been happening for the last couple of weeks. And from your perspective, this return to play policy and the protocols and where you think it is right now and what can we expect in the future?
Look, I don't know what you could expect in the future, really. But what I do know is that every season it's different. You know, we've moved international windows. We're changing things around. We've now got tests after Super Rugby, which I think is great, rather than interfering with it halfway through. It's an imperfect year calendar, isn't it? And the goal is to make sure that we've got players playing from the 31st of January to the 20th of November. And there's a little bit of a cost to that because we've got to manage workload and player welfare through that. So it's not perfect, but we've just got to look at it again from a flexibility side. We're hearing the voices, we understand that, and we understand that it doesn't fit everyone, but we just need to get together with the coaches again and have another talk, because we've all agreed on what we wanted to do for this year. And so now everyone's sort of saying there's some other ideas. Well, that's great. So let's listen to them and figure out. But clearly, flexibility comes at a cost, because it means that one day your team might be playing another team that's got a couple of All Blacks playing and yours aren't allowed to. So people have to learn to live with that.
Something I talk to in the public, they look at this retrospectively, so what happened last year, but really it's about getting players ready to play well enough in Super Rugby and then be ready for you. So things have changed over the years. Have you been in situations where you've got All Blacks and you've just gone, these guys are too tired, we're going to have to rest them?
Yeah, well, I mean, the spotlight's always on this policy in the first few rounds, but it's, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had to manage players through the international window too. So this is not a sort of a them and us thing. This is a how the heck do we actually get, players performing at their peak right through a long season? And it does require breaks, and it does require some sort of management of time, and there's always a cost to that. So we're trying our best in that space, and reality is, if you look at the results of it, we've been pretty good in Super Rugby. We've often had 4 teams in the playoffs, and we've won it regularly, and the same with the All Blacks, Steve. So the overall policy, I think, is working, but there's some call out for more flexibility, and I think that's worth listening to.
I mean, Foz, you've been in their shoes. You've been on the other side of it, where you've had to sort of compromise a little bit too. So it's a little bit unique here in New Zealand, because there's a buy-in from the coaches. Do you really have that sort of buy-in? You've mentioned the fact that you're obviously listening, but is it a case of you guys going back now and saying, well, we've started the first couple of rounds. What now can we actually, find a little bit of compromise? Because there is. You're obviously both Super Rugby coaches and yourselves want them to succeed, and also the All Blacks to succeed, right?
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, the Super franchises are vital for us. I mean, that's where a lot of our player development's done. So, and we're fortunate. We've got some great environments in this country. So, first and foremost, they're vital to the All Blacks. And so we want to make them successful, but we've also got to act as responsible employers and making sure we're making good decisions for the athletes. So, and ironically, you go to round 1, and I know people are grumbling about a few things, but I think we had 16 or something out of possible 19 All Blacks playing in round 1, and they were playing well. And so it's not all bad. And by the way, there's also a lot of young talent coming through, and that's exciting for the competition as well. So, hey, it's imperfect, accept that, but we just got to have some more conversations and see what flexible means and whether it can work.
What role is it that you play in that discussion then? How much are you driving it? How much would you like to drive that discussion?
Well, look, I'm a key part of it, but I'm not an expert on sports science, on player management, on how to maximise the physical side of a player. So we take a lot of data on that basis, and some of that data is, like there's nothing sort of that's categorical. This is the 100% proof information you use, and a lot of it is anecdotal and common sense. So, and therefore it's right to challenge it, but it's done by a group of people.
Yeah, Fozzie, I think it's different for me. I was different last week too. 2 years ago, I was the benefactor of this policy. I wanted that rest and I needed that rest, and I got it and I enjoyed it. Is it a case now of these are the rules, this is for player safety, it has worked for us for quite a while, prepare Super Rugby coaches and toughen up? You don't want to say that, do you?
Well, no, I don't want to say that, because I don't actually believe that. Because I think that it has been a policy that's worked well for us. But I just want to remind people that, the All Blacks have been in the Super Rugby franchise environment this year for 3 weeks, 100% before the campaign. They've generally played round 1. For some of them, if you're a front row or halfback, we're not managing your minutes at all. You 180 minutes over 3 games, you generally get subbed off after 45 anyway. But it is a variable that's annoying people, and there are some individual cases that it kind of makes sense to bring a bit of flexibility into it. So that's where we have to approach it.
But you can say here tonight, you guys have looked at it, you've listened, and you're going to move on and review this, and everyone's going to come into agreement, right?
Yeah, well, that's the plan. I mean, we already have come into agreement before.
By the way. But you're listening now to what people are talking about, and we'll revisit it. Yeah, but
the answer is yes. But we have listened before, and we've come up with a plan. Now, suddenly people have voiced quite vocally that there's a few things about it they don't like. Well, that's okay. We probably would have preferred to hear a different way, but that's the way we hear it. But that doesn't mean that what they're saying hasn't got some validity in it. And, you know, like I agree with Gats. Gats said, you know, they just want to be trusted. Well, that's great. So what can we trust you to do? So it's just us getting alignment on that.
I think it's time to move on from this conversation. Let's
Please.
move on from that. The fact, and I think everyone can. I think we can, because bottom line is the fact that they've looked at it, they've listened, they will make some decisions with the right people. Well, of course, there was a lot of debate going into last week's game about who was going to win between the Chiefs and Crusaders. And for the Crusaders, the selection of David Havili was the surprise. We asked Glenn Jackson to do some analysis and talk about his on-field performance.
This week we're going to talk about one of New Zealand's hot topics last year. Last year it was a 10 moving to 15. This weekend we had a 15 moving to 10, and David Havili from the Crusaders. What I really liked about David, early doors, some of his touches were world class. Here we see one of his first kicks in the game, and if we pause it just after he gets the ball here, what we can see is the Chiefs gives David a lot of room out the back, and he executes this kick to perfection as he lets it go now. Sevi Reece gets the ball, and wonderful start for the Crusaders and a good start for David. His second kick, unfortunately for the crossfield kick, if we pause it just now, we probably see the same sort of picture. And this is probably where he's just been let down a little bit by not playing much 10. If he gets this kick right, I think the Crusaders score again on the same sort of channel. One of the other things that David did extremely well in this game, especially in the first half, was his passing. Again, identifying the space in the wide channel. Straight to Sevi Reece, pretty hard to stop one-on-one there. Fabulous pass. If we stop it there, that is a fantastic ball. Again, the Chiefs always step in. It's a Warren Gatlin defence. They step in, and we've got space again down the wide channels. I think his best pass of the game was this one here. Again, the Crusaders on front foot ball, and that is a miracle ball. Straight through a gap here, and really the Crusaders will be kicking themselves. They didn't score here because that should have been a 5-pointer. A really, really good start from someone that hasn't played a lot of 10, especially at Super Rugby level. Then we had the second half, and whether it was David Havili or the Crusaders, they seemed to change the way they played. A lot of passes in behind the forward runners. Here, poor old Havili wasn't ready for the ball. About 2 minutes later, the Chiefs go over for a great try. Secondly, we've got another one coming up here. Again, we've got balls in behind the forward runners. We've still got that space, as you can see, up in the 15, but all of a sudden the Crusaders want to play through the Chiefs. We get a forward pass there. So 2 opportunities, I think, that David could have carried on in the first half that didn't happen in the second half. Really good example of everything that didn't go quite right for the Crusaders here. Reasonably poor takeoff from the line-out, creating slow ball. Messy ball at the breakdown here, giving Havili no opportunity to do anything but take the ball up. This then took him out of the game for about the next 10 phases. And the Crusaders are on the back foot pretty much the whole time. But if we can see it from the first half to the second half, the Chiefs are giving them pretty much similar sort of pattern, but the Crusaders' balls were slower. They didn't get to the wide channel, creating a lot of opportunity for the Chiefs and their ball carriers, ball hunters, to turn the ball over. I think overall, for me, I think David and the Crusaders and the All Blacks should be really happy with how he went at 10, especially in the first half. He created a lot of those opportunities for try scoring in the first half. It was just the second half stuff that probably let him down. But I'm sure the Crusaders will be happy to have Richie back, but knowing that David could step up at any time.
I thought it was an outstanding performance. You think about probably the most talked about concept in 2019, Fozzie, was the dual pivot. That all of a sudden, because you had guys who could play both 10 and 15, gave you selection dilemmas, I am sure. But for you, I mean, explain to us in your mind what dual pivot means, and is it something you're looking at going forward? Or has it always been there?
Look, it's always been there. It hasn't always, we haven't always done it the way we've done it, but it's about having an extra decision maker on the park, running another side of the park. And so, like when we used Goldie there with Richie, I mean, it wasn't a deliberate move to move Goldie back. It was also the fact that Richie was playing well and actually earned a right to go into there for us to have a look at it. So, and Goldie touched the ball as much as what he did when he was at 10. So, you know, you talked a lot about David in that game, and probably the thing that David Havili was missing at 10 was David Havili at 15.
Yeah.
You know, and so when Richie was there, David actually is a great communicator with him, and so you get your dual pivot going there, and that's something that they'll probably have to grow. But you just got to have decision makers on the park, and we've got a couple of good ones.
Yeah, I guess it's a funny one for me. I'm a forward and I'm asking a backs question, but my understanding and limited forward understanding of a dual playmaker. So we've seen Will Guinea at 9, Quade Cooper at 10. That's a sort of a dual playmaker on the field. You see Ford and Farrell 10 and 12 at the moment, and that's the way they're doing it. Are we the only ones doing 10, 15 dual playmaker, or is there someone else doing it? And if we're the only ones doing it, is it just going to need a little bit more time?
Yeah, look, I was really pleased with the progress here. I mean, we're going to relook at that too, by the way. I mean, it's not set in concrete for us. Aussie use Kurtley Beale a lot in that space, and sometimes he's 15, sometimes he's 12, so they've really got two things. But if you look at the amount of rucks that you have, and some of the clips that you showed with David, particularly the midfield rucks in the centre of the park, having people on either side that have got the skill set, I think, to be a 10, means that you can run a sort of attack on both sides and make clearer decisions, and that's really what I think dual playmaker means.
I mean, the first time that Millsy went from centre to fullback, I'm going, whoa, how hard's that? I mean, I was a right wing, you know. Props now can play both sides. Is the specialist back especially just a thing of the past? We've got people playing every position. I mean, Havili could probably play 10, 12, 15, and I've seen him play on the wing. I mean, is the specialist back play, I know you props get sensitive about this, over as a future's concerned?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that we're lucky enough we've got some players that are multi-talented, and I think some of the work, some of the exposure that they get at Super Rugby in different positions is really good for them, because they learn to see things differently and they learn how. But the big thing you got now is because defences are wider and quicker, if you just have the person on the inside making all the decisions, then you're going to have a very limited view. So often key decisions now are coming off the second or third receiver, not just the first. And so you're really looking to make sure that your midfielders or your fullback have got a really ability to see clear pitches.
Has the picture in 2020 changed significantly to what you had available to you last season? The return of Damien McKenzie, the return of Aaron Cruden to the Chiefs. I want to ask you first, can he be considered for the All Blacks in 2020, Aaron Cruden?
Yeah, I think so. You know, to be fair, we know he's off to Japan at the end of the year, and what that looks like. So I don't know the exact detail, but I'd like to think so.
But he's a guy who is a specific 10. He is that's what he does. I mean, the return of Damien McKenzie. I mean, all of a sudden, the wealth of talent you've had, and in the past, you've found ways to get everyone on the park. That's going to be challenging in 2020 if everyone's fit and available.
Oh, look, there's no doubt. And I mean, I think if you know, once we finish sulking about the World Cup and we sit down and think, OK, well, there's a lot of young talent on the park that day. And so there's a lot of pain in the guys, but there's a lot of those people are coming back. And so we've got to make sure we grow that group. But, yeah, there are some big decisions to make in the backs. But the exciting thing is that we're developing more people that are comfortable to do something and make a decision when they've got the ball in their hand.
Fozzie, I mean, I know it's only been round 2. You seem reasonably happy with the guys' individuals' performances. You talked about versatility in the backs, but you've also lost a lot of kept players. What keeps you up at night now, thinking, man, we've got to fill those positions?
Yeah, look, I mean, well, you look at the likes of Rito, and big shoes to fill. So, and you look at the experience of someone like Brodie Retallick, who's going to be away for a year and a half, and you could argue that you can't replace those guys. So, but what they do is they create great opportunities for the next tier, and that's what I'm an optimist when it comes to New Zealand rugby. Like I know we do a lot on the negatives, but the fact is, every time there's an opportunity, we see young people coming in and taking it, and that's the good work that's done at Mitre 10, and it's a great work that's done at the super level with the expanded squads they now have, that they're actually bringing players through that are well equipped. So what's keeping me awake at night? Well, I'm just too excited, mate. I just want to get into it. And I think we've got a bunch of guys that have got a point to prove, and we've got some great opportunity to bring us some new talent through. So it's quite nice looking at it with a bit of a clean slate. We've got to sort of captain out. So a few thoughts going on in that space.
Kid, mate, just right under here.
Well, you were my captain in the Chiefs, mate. Heck of a good job of it too.
Fozzie, I know the World Cup was incredibly disappointing. Congratulations on the way the team acted, and I was over there. Both the team and New Zealand supporters were incredibly mature. That doesn't change the hurt, and I know you've done a deep review of that. I mean, what are your key learnings taking over as head coach now to take out of that pain moving forward? What's the big thing that's come out for you?
Well, look, there's a million things that I probably can't cover in 60 seconds and probably don't want to either, but it's, you know, like no one in that group had lost a World Cup game and of the playing group. And so it's going to, you know, now we know what it feels like and it's not nice. And so that's got to fuel this next generation because we want to be number one and we're not, and it hurt. And so I think there's that little bit of if there was any complacency in our group, and I don't believe there was, but if there was, we just got a sharp uppercut with that. We've got to figure out how to play teams physically when they play us physically, and more teams want to prevent us to play. And I think that when we get our game right, when we understand the nature of the beast we're playing. Like we got up for South Africa, got up for Ireland, and I thought they were outstanding games. And yet we didn't get up for England. We didn't define that challenge well enough for us. And they played us a certain way, and it looked like it surprised us, even though it shouldn't have. And so we've got to figure out how we approach that type of challenge.
Yeah, Fozzie, we've talked a lot about selections, and most of it's been based around players. Now, Chrono, Hansen, Smithy. These are names that we've heard for a long time now, and with selection, you've had to create a whole new different team. How excited are you about that team, and how are we going to know, when are we going to know when you know that you've nailed those selections as well?
You mean the whole management team?
Yep.
Yeah, no, I've basically got that sorted, so it's been a busy January, and you know, we've got a lot of our backroom staff coming back, and I'm delighted with that because I think they're the part of the secret ingredient in the All Blacks anyway. And we all focus on the coaching group, but we've got our trainers, physios, medicos in that space have done an outstanding job. So there's a few more things to finalise. The coaching group's been pretty well documented, but can I just say, like, we've been around the franchises. The only one we haven't done yet is the Hurricanes, but it's been awesome seeing Plum and Fiki and Stormy get to know some of the players, and particularly Plum and Fiki in there for the first time. They're bringing massive energy and can't wait. You know, they bring different experience, different ideas, and we're just chucking everything on the pot at the moment.
You look at this challenge in front of you and the conversations you have and selection, and how important was it bringing Foxy back or convincing Foxy to come back? Because he was adamant, JK, you know him well, he was adamant that he was done. Well, how did you do that? I mean, how hazy a phone call was it, or the fact, was he just waiting? Was he sitting by the phone going, you know what? Maybe I just want to have one more go. Maybe I can help get this right. Maybe I can help the next generation. Was it that, or was it simpler than that with Foxy?
Well, no, it wasn't simple, but look, I think he's an unsung hero behind the scenes, what he does as a selector. He's outstanding. He wanted to finish, so I told myself not to ask him because I knew if I pushed him too hard that he probably would say yes, but I really wanted him to come to that conclusion. But look, I'm delighted, and I think, you know, there's a, you know, thanks Adele, I'll thank his wife, you know, because it's a big commitment for Foxy, and it's a little bit unstated, but it's been fantastic that she's been willing to let him carry on for another term. Yeah,
and we've always seen that continuity does work. The fact that you bring guys in who understand the environment, understand the players, it can lead to success. It has in the past. Well, our good friends at Rugby Past, we are live going in around the globe. We asked them in a new segment, well, this segment for tonight is Ask the Boss, Kirsty, and what have our viewers, what have our watchers, what have our people online asked of our All Black
I just want you to know, Ian, these aren't from me. These are actually from the fans at home. It's been your opportunity to ask Ian whatever you have wanted. Let's go with question number one. Are you concerned about the lack of powerful ball-running number 8s? Now, you've already touched on Kieran Reid. Maybe we can expand that question and ask who you're looking at to fill that void.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to say it's a position of concern, but it's definitely a position of interest. You know, we used Darty a lot there before, and I love the potential of what he does. But you have to have him on the park, and we've got a number of guys that we've utilised, but this Super campaign is really vital in that position, 6 and 8. You know, we need people to actually show week in, week out that they've got what it takes to go to the next step.
Question number 2, we'll move on. What is the next step in reshaping the All Blacks, and how do you evolve as a team?
Look, we always are evolving. You know, every year, I mean, the All Blacks have never sat still. So, I mean, that's a given. But we've been given this, you know, we've been given this gift of losing a semi-final, which means that there's some things in our environment that we do need to reshape. And like I think I mentioned before, is that particularly learning how to deal with teams physically if they want to play with us, play against us in that sort of mode. And I think, you know, some of the physicality of our game and where we use it needs addressing.
The term fear factor has been used a little bit, not necessarily with the All Blacks, but the next question is about that. Do you think the All Blacks still have their fear factor, seeing as other teams are beating the All Blacks now?
Yeah, look, I hear that often, and you know, I'm not trying to get defensive, but, you know, the last 8 years we've won 89% of our test matches, and so it's the most that we've done in our history. So are other teams scared of us? You have to ask them that. I certainly think that they probably prepare for the game of their lives when they play us, and maybe that does mean they still fear us a bit.
Yeah, I think that question there really I want to address as well, because no one fears anyone on the rugby field. There's unbelievable respect, and there's teams that go out knowing you have to play your best game to beat the All Blacks, right? So I think this fear thing is talked about, and I think it's got a little bit to do with the haka and intimidation. It just does not exist in the opposition. I don't think England fear us. I don't think they ever have. Do they know they've got to play their best game to beat us? Yes. So I think we just drop the fear stuff and say, how do you get your confidence back after you've had a big loss? You know, how do you get back? But like Fozzie said, we're winning 90% of the time, and anyone who doesn't respect that is going to get bitten.
Well, it's history, isn't it? And it's not about being fearful of the All Blacks. It's the doubt. It's the doubt in key moments, and that's what you're after. And the doubt comes from that 89-90% winning successions, and so that's what the teams are looking at. It's the moment, the big moments in the game that the All Blacks have been able to win through that doubt as well. It's not so much the fact that teams fear us.
You agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, look, that's a great conversation, but reality is that what my job is to make sure that we're nailing the next test match, and if we play as well as we can, then I know that teams will understand they've got to be at their best when they play us. So there's a lot about this we control, and it's up to us to show that.
Look, I'm excited for 2020, the performance of the All Blacks, but there's so much more before that. Look, I had a light bulb moment last week when I talked about the fact we should stop the clock for conversions so we get more rugby. It's this week, it's Kane Hames' turn. What's your light bulb moment from the weekend?
Yeah, well, I guess for me it's hard. Like, we spend so much time in preparation, we use a ton of footage in that preparation, and bear in mind I've only played 90 maybe first-class games, but I've never heard of footage being shown at halftime as part of the halftime speech. You'll see Gatlin doing a lot of the talking here, but sometime, somewhere in this shed, the old reel got bored out and a ton of footage got shown, and you saw the change that it showed on the second half. I don't know, is Gatlin a mastermind, or has this been done plenty of other places?
We just don't show the film to the props, mate.
Is that how it works? You've seen plenty of it, Mills, haven't you?
Yeah, we've had it. We've had it on iPads, and Smithy used to get it out, and I think you might have done it a couple of times. But yeah, it's. I think the interesting part.
Yeah, the interesting part. You're right. The interesting part was it was a training drill. That's what really surprised me. I've seen people use it, but he used a training drill. I thought that's cool.
And not the live stuff,
yeah. But I mean, different ways to learn, right, mate? Yeah, and people will understand.
I've got to give you a card. We're going to go.
Red?
Yeah, no, not a red card. We'll stop there. We've got plenty more to talk after the break. Stay with us.
With a nice break down the right side. Now they shift quickly to the left edge. Crusaders for Philly. Another try for the Agawanis. They're going to have a little look, but I don't think there's much to see. Shoulder on him, but not enough to affect. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, Jordie Barrett. Oh, we missed that. Jordie Barrett comes up with a huge defensive play.
Yes, welcome back to the breakdown performance of Jordie Barrett on the weekend. A lot to prove. Big win for the Hurricanes. Look, that wasn't the only thing he was doing on the weekend, though. Jordie Barrett was in great form, and it was all about this kick. What about this kick? This is why. Is this why you put him on the bench against England, Fozzie?
Yeah, well, he's got a great boot on him, and it's quite useful to have.
Is this your era? Oh, no. Kane, run us through this one.
Yeah, well, Paul Thornborn, this is probably the biggest one that we've seen, 64.2 metres, and the key thing about that is you guys should have all played with this, the leather ball.
Yeah.
And it was down.
The old Adidas one.
Beautiful.
When it got wet, it wasn't beautiful.
It had a broken toe after that.
It was a broken toe killer. I mean, that's the first thing you do when you get altitude, though, Mills.
Oh, yeah.
You get to Pretoria, you get to Johannesburg. First thing you do is away you go, right?
It's amazing how good you
How far did you get?
I didn't go for a shot, mate. I just wanted to punt. No way I was shooting at goals.
JK would never have practiced either. It's time for Northern Exposure, time to look at the Northern Hemisphere, Six Nations action and some important wins over the weekend, particularly for France. If you're going to build on beating England, what do you got to do? You've got to go out and beat Italy, and they managed to do that. Good game of rugby. I'd say Italy are actually happy with that. The fact they weren't good last week. They were better this game. France did what they needed to do. But this one here, great interest, I'm sure, to Ian Foster. Wales, who are coming here in the middle of the year, taking on Ireland. Ireland coming in over the top. How much are you keeping an eye on this competition? You just said in the break you're on your way over there. That's not a bad trip, is it? So for you, is this about reconnaissance? This is about seeing what these teams are up to?
Yeah, we're watching it closely because that's clearly who we're playing. So you're going over to watch a couple of Wales games and a Scotland game and catching up with Brad Moore over there before he comes back here. So, but yeah, it's a great competition, the Six Nations, and there's a lot of passion, and it's been good for us to see. We're trying to pick up what things they've picked up from the World Cup that they're trying to evolve their games along.
Yeah, I mean, if you are in New Zealand, I know a lot of New Zealanders don't like this competition. I coached in it, and it is amazing, isn't it, Mills? You've got to sort of go over there to believe it. It is a different game. Yeah. You know, if you looked at the other games, if you looked at the England-Scotland game, we would say it was horrible. But they don't. It's like this challenge, it's a whole weekend, it's this environment. But it is different rugby, Fozzie. It's something you need to think about when you're tactically playing against Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, and often at this time of year it's wet and it's cold and it's dark, and the type of rugby you see sort of reflects that. So there's a lot of kicking, but there is a lot of tension and passion, and so it means so much to them. And, you know, we put the same credence on the Bledisloe and the Rugby Championship, but we've got to give credence to the Six Nations. They do it well.
We shouldn't forget, these are teams as well that will be disappointed with their performance of a Rugby World Cup. Ireland, Wales, the fact they missed their opportunity to England. So much to prove, Kane. These guys, if they can go back and re-establish themselves in Six Nations, they're a long way, I suppose, to starting their 4-year cycle.
Yeah, well, I guess so. And you talked about a little bit earlier, you only need to win 2 games to win this competition. And
yeah, I know. I get frustrated with this because Scotland and Italy don't play well enough on a consistent basis. The fact that I see this competition being better if Italy were better and more competitive on a consistent basis. But I look at this, Kane, and going, you know what? For those other sides, though, there's still a lot for them to come out and prove. And the fact, you know, they come on tour and they play the All Blacks, they play South Africa and Australia.
Yeah, well, but first of all, before there's even a World Cup, there's this, and this has been around for a long time. So I love how they put so much focus on it. You know, it used to be 5 nations, it could have been 4 nations, who knows how long, but it's been going on for ages, and there's so much passion. There's so much passion going into that tournament. So I love how they put so much focus into it.
It's 6 right now. It's 6 right now. That rumour coming out that, you know, in 4 or 5 years' time. Did you read anything to that? And I think I read a quote you talking about you'd like for us to continue to keep playing the Springboks.
Yeah, look, I've got nothing to do with the negotiations of what they're doing, but you know, as far as we're concerned, they're here. But I mean, purely from a rugby fan basis, I mean, All Blacks South African games are vital, aren't they? Like, they're one of our greatest foes. We have massive games against them. We respect them. So, you know, long may they continue to be here.
Fozzie, I mean, you mentioned you've watched a bit of the Six Nations already on TV. You're going to go over there and see it live. What have you seen from Wales in terms of what they're going to bring in? And I suppose when you look at it, they're pretty settled in terms of their leadership. I mean, you talk about needing a captain. Are we going to get a captain, you know, nice and early, or are you going to leave it until the naming of the squad? 2 questions.
Well, I won't answer that question.
Oh, okay.
So I'll answer the first one, which is about Wales. Yeah, Wales are settled, but you know, they've got a new coach, and you know, with Wayne, obviously he's well known in New Zealand circles, and he's taken over. So, and he's stated that he wants to change the way they play. So we're just having a look at that to see what changes there are. And you know, there's been a great core of players that Gats has brought through into that group, and so we know they've got a lot of heart and soul, and we've just got to figure out what's new and what's different, so that when they come over here, we're ready.
I would say this though, Kirsty, nothing changes with Eddie Jones.
No. At the risk of this turning into the Eddie Jones show, well, wherever he goes, drama seems to follow, and the same again happened over the weekend. We know that he is famous for his pre-game antics, or as we like to call them, mind games, and he was at it with the media again over the weekend. The man that usually has a lot to say didn't have very much to say at all.
No comment, mate. Fun, isn't it? No comment.
I don't know.
I think it's fun. I think we might keep doing it.
He's so brilliant, isn't he? He's so entertaining, honestly. What would rugby be without Eddie? I don't know what the breakdown would be without Eddie.
No,
he keeps
you're right.
entertaining us week in and week out. But that's not all. They may have won that game against Scotland at Murrayfield, but he lashed out at the Scottish fans, calling them disrespectful. One of the England assistant coaches had a bottle of beer thrown at him, and Owen Farrell was constantly booed when he was trying to kick balls. And, well, this time Eddie didn't keep quiet.
We weren't expecting beer bottles to be thrown at us. That's a new trick. So it's a pretty good achievement, isn't it, throwing beer bottles? You've got to be pretty brave to throw a beer bottle. Yeah, rugby's had a culture of being respectful, and respect counted to the kicker, having silence when the kicker kicks. So if we don't want to have that, if there's a new level of respect in Scotland, we've got to put up with it. If that's how the Scottish fans are going to be respectful, we have to acknowledge it and just get on with it.
He's right. But Eddie being Eddie, he can't keep quiet for long, can he?
Well, he's half right, and I love Eddie Jones. I consider him a mate. If I'm ever overseas, I'll have a beer with him. But what he needs to be careful is the Scottish said that the wind got the bottles, but
That's a big win.
if you're divisive in your comments and you are always baiting people, you need to take a look at yourself and say, when is that now turning our game into something where someone's going to react to that? So that's all. Just double check what he's saying first.
The fact that they're saying they're full bottles in Scotland and they're throwing them, I
Yes.
find that hard to believe. They are not throwing full bottles of beer away. Massive thank you, as always, Sir John Kerwin, Mills Milioina and Kane Hames. Thank you so much, Ian Foster. So much to look forward to this week. Look forward to the All Black season, of course, but it's all about Super Rugby. Blues taking on the Crusaders Friday night at Eden Park, and then on Thursday night, Kirsty is back. Her team, Mills Milioina, Carl Tanana. Who knows who else is going to be on that show? Make sure you check it out Thursday night at 8:30. We'll see you next Tuesday night.